Hi, my name is Vladimir Djukanovic, and welcome to One Final Twist. We're going to be talking about my novel, Glitter.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me first, and thank you again for being the first one to, kind of push my book in
Thank
the
you.
US. It means
I
a lot.
I really did enjoy it. It's such a good thriller, very
Thank you.
technical. So tell our listeners and viewers about your book.
Okay, actually, I studied philosophy and economics back in. I went to school in Indiana, small school called DePaul University. I went all the way from Serbia back in the 90s. Got a scholarship there and uh, studied economics because I had to make some money somehow. I had to think about my financial future at the moment. But actually, what I really why my passion is philosophy and writing, and that's actually what I focus on. And I did have a financial career, on Wall Street. Typical thing was an analyst at J.P. Morgan, and then was a trader, and then spent about 20 years doing that, and then said at one moment said thank you. That was enough of that. Now we're gonna start doing what we like to do, and that's actually writing philosophical pieces and novels. So actually, Glitter is a culmination of that work. It's actually I. My focus is philosophy of artificial intelligence, which is now that field is becoming more popular, but it was quite obscure, as you can imagine, for decades.
Yes.
Although those who followed the that part of philosophy know why it's important, and we kind of got lucky in the past few years because of ChatGPT. Now everybody's talking about artificial intelligence. Although just a few years ago, we can really say that too many people focused on this, other than technically.
Gotcha. So where did you come up with the idea of glitter? How did you think that up? That whole reset, I guess you could say.
Exactly. Well, the whole idea, after studying the topic for a long time, my idea was like to take all these ideas from philosophy of artificial intelligence and philosophy of mind and consciousness, and write a novel that will hopefully encompass all those ideas that have developed in the past, 2 or 3 decades. So I don't know if I was successful in doing this. You will tell me that, but I wanted to take these ideas and dramatize them, so that it's easier for the public to kind of get closer to these ideas and these topics, because some of them are quite technical, as you can imagine, because philosophy in the past, decades has become quite technical. So in order to avoid those things and present ideas like singularity and the ideas of Professor David Chalmers or Nick Bostrom or some of the real, I think, important thinkers of today, contemporary thinkers, and to bring their work closer to the public. That's why I actually wrote Glitter, and you read it, so you know that I kind of tried to go from the beginning of these ideas about artificial intelligence from the very beginning, how we thought about this, and then to go through the history of philosophy of artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
pretty much up until a few years ago.
You did a really good job at making something that could be very, very technical into where it's very relatable to the everyday reader. Um, it's not way over the reader's head. It's very relatable. Um, who were some of your literary influences that made you want to be a writer?
Well, I can tell you, coming from Eastern Europe, obviously from Serbia, we are obsessed with some of the classical literature, especially the Russian one. So my first love is Dostoevsky, obviously. Coming from the classical, literature. Crime and Punishment is the book that I read. I don't even know how many times, and I do identify with Raskolnikov on many levels, just because the way that book was written. I was introduced to science fiction in college, thanks to one of the professors at DePaul, a brilliant Istvan Sisori, who actually introduced me to writers like Stanislav Lem, who wrote Solaris, for example, and then the most important writer of my life, I would say, and that's Philip K. Dick. I'm obsessed by his work and his madness, and anywhere from Minor Report to the whole idea, do androids dream of electric sheep, is probably one of the best novellas within science fiction ever written. So those are the people. Vernon Vinge was extremely important in my work. Not only obviously he's a great science fiction writer, but he's also a great philosopher. His work on technical singularity, is probably one of the seminal works in philosophy of artificial intelligence, which kind of lays out how this thing will unfold. So I again used my knowledge, with literally knowledge, to take these ideas. As you said, these are quite often they're technical, and they can be quite boring as well. So I try to make them less boring. Those technical things. That's why I have this whole action sci-fi setup. In order to get people engaged and to keep the story moving. And then once you get to the actual trial, then the whole thing, and actually that part is again based on the famous US TV show called Law and Order. And there was a part of my life when I was obsessed with that show, and that whole setup. The crime happens, then there is police investigating it, and then the prosecutors and the judges and everything. So the last part was definitely inspired by that show.
AI in itself, how it's used, is very beneficial. But some of the your fellow authors, they're anti-AI because of their books were used to train AI, and um, very, very controversial. But in some aspects of life, AI is very beneficial, but it has to be kept in check.
Well,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I mean, that's an old story. It's the whole. We started developing technology several centuries ago. And from the very moment, from some of these first technologies, you always have this segment of population that people like Luddites. They did not like technology. They believed that it will bring only evil, and not actually help human progress. But so you always have this, at every development of technology, you have technophobes. And it's actually funny, if you study technophobia, it's a very curious phenomenon. Why? Because it's I would explain it as something that happens in a short period of time and then transcends into another technology. What actually happens? How can I explain this? So I remember. I remember when my grandma used to tell me about the time when radio showed up. Radio was a great technology, etc., etc. But when she was a little girl, all the older people were, they were traumatized by this technology. They really thought that it's going to destroy, family, society. It's going to be, it's going to make the same thing that we're telling kids about phones.
Yeah.
That's what my grandma used to be told about radio. And then the funny thing was she said, it's like, but you know what changed that? I was like, what? TV.
Mhm.
When TV came about as a new technology, which is obviously, so it's a funny thing what happened with people who liked radio as a new technology. These people now at certain age, obviously, saw TV as a threat.
Mhm.
And the funniest thing is like, oh, remember the good old days when we used to sit around radio and listen to like Orson Welles, and all these great radio dramas and blah blah blah. Look at this television, this evil, blah blah. So if you follow the development of technophobia, it's always the same cycle. Young people adopted immediately, older people adopt it less, and certain generation reject it completely because they don't understand it at all. So this is exactly what's happening with artificial intelligence, with one significant difference. All technology that we have developed so far is not intelligent. Simply, it's all these technologies are kind of dumb. TV is dumb, radio is dumb. Nuclear weapons are basically dumb. You need a human being to, send them and fire them and do all that stuff. What's different this time, and this is why we don't really develop. We never developed philosophy of television, philosophy of radio, but we do have this, entire segment of philosophy that studies, obviously mind, consciousness, and artificial intelligence. For the first time, we're building something that's similar to us, and that's potentially, our competition. So that is truly different, and that's why all these people like Professor David Chalmers and Nick Bostrom, insist that we should not only study, AI from the technical point of view, but it's very important to study social consequences, and thus you need philosophy there.
Yeah. When you wrote Glitter, did you plot it out, or did you just kind of start writing and just let it flow, and then you go back and you kind of shape things up? How did that process work for you?
Well, actually, I tell you, the whole process was, it was my 2015 New Year resolution to actually sit down and write a novel. So and then the book was published first time here in Serbia about 3 years ago. And now finally, a couple of months ago, we got it to the US market. So it was a long, difficult, and mind-breaking process. I mean, writing a novel of this type, I would say, is the most difficult. I've done some relatively difficult things in my life, but this is by far the most difficult intellectual endeavor. Because if you want to do it right, it becomes pure hell. So I had the basic story. Again, the backbone of the story is the philosophy that I studied. So in that regard, it was much easier. But then I thought it's going to be very easy to take all these technical ideas and make them relatable. It was quite difficult. The book was 380 pages long and blah blah blah. So you can imagine, I think 9 editors altogether, finally to get to the final version. So you can imagine the hell I went through. So and then it basically, I don't know. Let me see. The US version is now, I want here. It's 200 and whatever, 40
I've got it.
pages.
Yeah, I've got the
So
American version.
yeah, yeah.
It's
So
my version is 248 pages.
okay, 248
Yeah.
exactly. So it went from almost 400 pages to that size. Again, writing a novel is difficult. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of research, and but then I really didn't wanna. I was lucky to meet several very one of the most famous Serbian writers, Marko Vidojkovic, was one of the editors, and I really thank him for kind of working with me on the final version, and explaining to me that writing novels, there's obviously there's the idea, there's the artistic part, but then there's that grunt work that you need to do, and there's structure, and again, often when people start writing, it's that whole idea, I'm gonna, that whole James Joyce thing, I'm gonna write down and it's gonna be stream of consciousness, and then the whole world is gonna go nuts. No, it's not that. Unfortunately, it's not how it works. It's a lot of work. It's a lot, and I used to work very hard. Again, I was one of those Wall Street guys working, long hours and everything. And believe me, that's nothing compared to this, because there's no one there with a whip behind you to make you do it.
So you're in Serbia now, right?
Yes, I live in Serbia, back in Serbia now.
So what was your biggest challenge in bringing your book to America, as other than translating from Serbian to English, without losing your passion and your story? How are you able to do that?
Actually, it wasn't that difficult because I do write in both languages. I do write in English, exactly, and then I write in Serbian or Serbo. Linguistically, that language is called Serbo-Croatian because it's shared by all these different nations here in the Balkans. So actually, originally, I wrote the book in English, thinking I'm going to publish it. I'm going to publish it in the U.S., thinking that's going to be easy peasy. But again, I wrote the first version, and then, despite the fact I know a lot of people in the publishing industry, etc., but thankfully, few of my friends told me this is a great effort, but this is not a finished work, and I thank them for that, because it is, what's in most other jobs, if you're in finance or in business, you have a project, you start the project, you finish the project, that's it, off you go to the next thing. Writing a novel, at one point it seemed like an endless well of with no light in the end, and you have to really be patient, and you have to give it time, because what's bizarre, you will sit down and you will write a page, and you will get your thoughts, you research everything on that page, then you will come back in a week, and it's a total disaster.
I spoke with Creed and Nathan last week, fellow Meridian authors, and they were talking, this is Creed's, that was his first book. Nathan's, he's well established, so it was more, and they were like, it's never over, it never ends. You just have to stay. You get to a point to where you say, okay, this is where we're going to end it. Then we end it, and then the process. And I can only imagine, with you not being in the United States, how hard that is to find a publisher, to find an agent, to.
It's extremely difficult. Yes. I tell you, it's extremely difficult, and that is actually, that's one of Nathan Meridia, publishing, and Nathan and his team. His idea is actually to take writers like me and publish them in the US, which is, I think it's a brilliant idea, because you get so many great books that just kind of fade away, and then maybe they get discovered after 2, 3, or 4 decades, Now with this technology, and it's quite difficult. And to be honest, if I wasn't part of the whole, US culture, basically, I didn't, if I didn't go to school there, and how Nathan happened, it happened accidentally through a friend of mine who used to work in finance as well, So, I told him about this book. I mean, he read it, he loved it, and Nathan is a friend of his, so he sent it to him. And then, that's how it happens more often than not. You have some very established, authors here in the region who never actually got their work published in the US, because it is not easy. And then especially there's a financial moment for some of those people, translating, traveling to the US and all that, etc., that becomes prohibitive, So I think Nathan's idea to do this is I think it's great. I think he's going to find some real gems, you know.
Yeah, because without it being in their hands, I would have never. This is a great book. I really did enjoy it. It's a quick read.
Yeah.
It flows, but I would have never been able to discover this had it not been for Meridia, the people at
Yes.
Meridia. Um,
No, it was huge. And again, that idea is fantastic because, and actually now, because I wrote another book, my second book is actually a book about investments that I publish here locally. And now I'm writing my third book, which is, again, a novel. My idea is like, I would like to write a novel, then more nonfiction, then, and do that hopefully. Now, hopefully, I give myself 2 years to finish the second novel, which is quite interesting.
so we'll see it in about 5, 6 years, maybe.
yeah, exactly. That's usually oh, this will be quick, and then off you go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. So, for you, what does being a successful writer mean?
Being a successful writer is actually the key is to be published. The key is to be published wherever you write, because again, I received a lot of help from a couple of people in the process, and especially from Marco, who pretty much told me, okay, you have to. He kind of told me, me being a businessman, I didn't want to approach my writing as a business. It was I at one point I found that almost insulting, But they said, no, you really have to approach it properly. You have to commit time when you research, when you write. I have my blog, which is in Serbo-Croatian, which I write usually once per week. The only reason why I keep up the blog because just to keep my writing current, and just to it is an exercise. And he told me, if you do, he told me your blog is like your gym. You should go to a gym every day for your body. You should write your blog to keep your writing up to speed. So now my third book is going to be again another sci-fi novel, which is set about 140 years down the road,
Okay.
to see how this whole mess is going to develop.
What are you currently reading right now?
I'm reading right now, actually, David Chalmers' book, The Conscious Mind. It's one of the most important pieces in the philosophy of mind and consciousness, because the whole idea, you obviously after reading literature, the central idea of philosophy of artificial intelligence is consciousness.
Yes.
And the big question: are machines going to become conscious or not? And that is a central idea, and it's obviously why. And I think it's probably one of the greatest philosophical questions, other than who am I and all those, basic ontological questions, So this is the book that gave us the idea about possible outcomes of development of superintelligence, and that book is also one of the foundations for Glitter, because it gives us pretty much 4 different outcomes if we encounter superintelligence, and that's I call them EIII, and that's extinction, isolation, then integration, and immersion. So basically, what happens, one of those things will happen. Either they're going to go against us immediately because then they're going to see us as inferior. Isolation, they're going to keep us like I don't just to study us like we keep animals in a zoo, So, and then the final is integration, and that's the idea that the only way we can the third one is kind of ignorance, where they're simply going to ignore us, and it is clear that human race is not going to accept that role. And the final is integration. It's actually what's already happening with Neuralink, with all these devices, where we're going to become these. There's going to be a combination of artificial intelligence or biological intelligence, and if you right now, there's no consensus, obviously, between philosophers and thinkers. But one of the ideas is like, okay, we have to integrate almost, because the whole idea of consciousness is also it's fantastic because we don't know what consciousness is. We have an idea how brain functions, neurons. We can measure things, but we have, and that's another. Professor Schalmer spent a lot of time studying consciousness and the nature of consciousness. Where did consciousness come from? Because when you look at the universe as is, and if you accept the modern technology, universe doesn't need consciousness. That's the bizarre thing, All laws, all bodies on the, within the universe, whether we're talking about the small scale atoms and stuff or large scale galaxies and planets, we don't find consciousness there. And then we get to the planet Earth, we get to human beings, Homo sapiens, we clearly find consciousness there. Okay, now there are discussions about consciousness within animals. That's a totally different topic. But consciousness as a concept is fantastic. It's a fantastic idea, but totally unknown, to us. We don't know the nature of consciousness really, how it comes about and why. And then on the other, so you have one fact, and nobody knows why. I mean, there are a lot of arguments about what consciousness is, but none of them are definitive. Then we have biology on the other hand, which is quite clear how the body works. But again, it nowhere in the biological process, from single cell organisms to us, you don't see need for consciousness. Where there's a point, okay, now we need consciousness. So it's a very difficult topic. So you have that fact, and then on the other hand, you have people who tell you, okay, machines will never become conscious, or you have the other school that tells you, oh, they're necessarily going to become conscious. Yeah. So it's a very peculiar situation we found ourselves in, because on one hand we have a phenomena that we know nothing about, our consciousness, and now we're concerned these machines will attain that. Consciousness, but we don't know how, where, and why. So it becomes very complex, like any topic.
It is, but it's very interesting. That's what makes us unique. That you're able to talk about consciousness and in multi-dimensional, not dimensions, but you have one side versus the other side. That was pretty good. So let's talk about something a little fun right now.
Yeah.
If you're able to take a road trip with any author or literary character, who would it be?
It would be Philip K. Dick.
Okay.
and you can imagine that road trip, huh? I mean, there's no one, all the, Shakespeare, and I don't know, a lot of people probably choose different. Shakespeare, Dostoevsky, it's all fine, love Tolstoy, it's all good. But I would pick Philip K. Dick. I would pay for the trip gladly.
I asked that question to most everybody that I talk to, and nobody has repeated. Every author has had a different answer.
That's great. That's a good question, though.
Just the wide variety of people that we talk to.
I'm just afraid with Philip K. Dick, I'm not sure that people would ever come back from that road trip.
That's true. That's true. In your opinion, what is one of the most underappreciated novels that has been published?
Underappreciated novel. That's actually a very good. I'm not sure if it's a novel, but Vernon Vinge's True Names. It's one of his first works. and it's short, so I think I think it's a novella, but
Yeah.
it's actually it's the first is the first work where kind of the whole idea about cyberspace, comes about. So it's a
Okay.
very it's I think it's a super important work, one of those work that kind of sets the tone for certain things. But I'm not, obviously he's a fire upon upon the deep, and his books that later on wrote. He won Hugo. I think he won Hugo Award like 2 or 3 times. I'm not 100% certain, but that's probably the one, because again they're kind of the idea about cyberspace and the life that we live today, kind of, and that we going forward to. That's the one that I would probably push.
So you kind of alluded earlier that you're working on another book, or you will be
Yes,
working on another book. Uh,
yes, I am 20% done.
20% done. Have you
Yeah,
got a title
20%.
yet?
I actually do have a title, and I think it's quite interesting because the title is Joy Division.
Joy Division.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. There's a super famous. I mean, super famous. Not probably that famous. It was a British band, Joy Division back in the day.
Yeah.
Very famous, and it's probably one of the most beautiful songs ever written. Love Will Tear Us Apart Again.
Yeah.
Written by Young
Okay.
Curtis. The tragic character of that band. I mean, the reason why I use that term is actually comes from Nazi Germany. Joy divisions were parts of concentration camps where like women were kept as like for like sexual abuse and all that
Yeah.
stuff. So
Okay.
actually, the next novel is going to the main motif is going to be gender. It's going to be. I think I'm studying gender and the nature of gender, and in light of everything that's happening today.
Uh-huh.
But I'm setting the book 140 years down the road, and
I
kind of
got you.
trying
Okay.
to see what happened with politics, with the development, and everything, and how the gender actually developed going forward.
Huh. If our listeners want to connect with you, how may they do that? What are your social media handles? If you're on social
Uh,
media,
Exactly. And again, my last name, Djukanovic.
well,
Djukanovic. So yeah, it's
it
actually quite easy to pronounce. It's written. It's one of those, Eastern European names. So a lot of people are thinking, why don't you take an English name? But it's Vladimir Djukanovic. It's actually quite easy, and that's my Instagram. I got a lot of followers on Instagram. They can hit me up there. I'm also starting a YouTube channel that's going to discuss generally like geopolitics from the perspective of the Southeast Europe and stuff like that. So they can hit me up there. Just please, I love to connect. I love to discuss, especially philosophy, artificial intelligence, and all these new developments. It's an interesting time we live in, as you can see. So I think. Uh, again, I must emphasize that artificial intelligence is quite important. It will help us a lot, but we have to be careful. We really have to be careful. And you have a lot of these people from left and right, Elon Musk, warning that this thing could get out of hand.
yes,
And again, certain regulation is needed. We need to agree what we want from artificial intelligence so that it doesn't accidentally become conscious
yeah.
as and we don't know what consciousness is, so it could accidentally become conscious.
This is true. This is true. Is there anything you want to talk about that I may not have asked that you're passionate about? Do you have any causes, anything like that?
No, absolutely. Well, thanks a lot again. Thanks for reading my book and everything you've done. Thank you for the interview. And this is kind of the first opportunity to kind of get in front of the U.S. public and explain what I'm trying to do. I always joke about this book. I tell people, if you want to learn how you're gonna die, just read Glitter.
Pretty much. I was like, who, the whole reset button thing
Yes.
that just threw me for a loop. I mean, it just
Yeah.
like, this really could happen.
Yes.
That's when you're reading a sci-fi whatever, and it
Yes.
comes to your mind, it's like, is there really a reset button? to
Yeah,
reset,
exactly.
you know?
Oh,
And
well, I mean, it's a funny thing. I do belong to that school of kind of, I would say, hard, science fiction, where I
yeah,
try to be true to science and everything
yeah,
around, obviously, as much as I possibly can, as an economist and a philosopher, but I try to keep that, to keep the thing alive, and
yeah,
so that when you get immersed, that you think, okay, this can happen to me, and it can happen actually quite easily. And we are large investors, obviously, in a lot of these energy projects and stuff like that. So I do know how electrical
yeah,
systems work from an investment point of view, and then I know some of the technical parts because you have to learn them, and it is quite interesting how the whole. That's why I decided definitely this is going to be the setting for the novel. Because I think it's very imaginative, and it allows you, to kind of explain, okay, how do you turn off electricity? How do you turn it back on? Uh, what happens when we
yeah,
turn off the electricity? Because
exactly.
electricity is one of those things. If I want to add something to this interview, we just take it for granted.
Oh,
It's like, here we go. There's light here where I am. There's light where you are, and we don't think about that. It's part of our nature now. You walk into the room. What do? You search for a light switch. When it's dark, you don't go to the bathroom, or you don't have a glass of water or have a sandwich. First you look for that light.
right.
Because you need that light in that room. So and we take it for granted. And then it's curious. I read a lot of book about the development of generally electricity, and it's funny how quickly people become accustomed to it. You go to some random village in Africa, they don't have electricity. You bring it in 6 months to a year. That's it. That's everyone's used to it. That's new standard, etc., etc. It is so crucial to our lives
It
that
is.
is mind-boggling. And then on the other hand, we just take it just like everything else in life. All the good stuff in life we take for granted,
Right.
unfortunately.
This is true. You know, I live in the southern United States, and we don't have very much super bad weather, but we know we have tornadoes and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And
I know that from Indiana.
so
I learned.
we may possibly get, if we get hit in the right spot, we may be out for several days, and then you realize how much we take advantage of turning the light switch on, and how much we appreciate it without appreciating it, if that makes sense.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, it's just like one of those things where we take it for granted, and we assume it will always be there. So
So, I want to thank you for joining me.
thank you, Scott.
This is his novel, Glitter by Vladimir Djukanovic.
There we go.
It's available from Meridia Books. It's on all the major websites in the United States. Does Meridia happen to have any signed copies of your books? Do you know?
We will gonna have them soon. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Now we're coming with it. Now with this, new year, we're starting with the whole marketing push, blah blah blah, going to different interviews and all that stuff. So now marketing is gonna start, and one of the things I'm gonna be in the U.S. at some point promoting the book. Yeah.
Okay, good. Look forward to that. Thank you again for joining me. When my
Thank you very
wife
much, Scott.